I think we'll go ahead and get started this evening. Thanks everyone for joining, and welcome to Sustainable and Local Farming to Help the Earth, part of our Earth Fest celebration this year. We are really excited to have you join us virtually. Our Earth Fest Steering Committee and partners have put together a full lineup of virtual events on all topics Earth related. And we invite you to visit our brand new website at earthfestrochestermn.org and follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/earthfestrochestermn to sign up for upcoming events. So today's event has been made possible by our sponsors that you've been seeing on the screen, and I'll stop the slideshow here in just a moment. But our platinum sponsors include Fresh Energy and Mayo Clinic. Our gold sponsors are AARP, Conservation Minnesota, Destination Medical Center, Daguna Consulting, Minnesota Public Radio, Sierra Club North Star Chapter, and Solar Connection. And our silver sponsors are Christ United Methodist Church, HGA, People's Food Co-op, Rochester Area Foundation, XRG Concepts, and Zumbro Valley Audubon Society. And I'll stop sharing my screen so you can see everyone. If you have any technical difficulties as we move through today's event, please contact me, Amanda Holloway, in the chat or via cell, my cell phone, which I added to the chat as well. Please keep your microphones muted unless invited to ask questions. You can also submit questions in the chat, and we'll be monitoring those throughout the event. You may turn on your video or off as you prefer. Today's session is being recorded, and we will send you a link within the next few days. So with that, I'd like to get us started with today's topic. We have a panel discussion with 3 local food and farm businesses who are doing their part to lessen agriculture's impact on the climate. I'm going to turn it over to our session moderator, Jeremy Emmy, to kick things off. So with that, Jeremy, over to you.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate it. Great. Well, thanks for joining us tonight, folks. We're very excited to have 3 farmers and producers who are working to protect our water, air, and soil, each in different ways. So tonight we'll have Brendon Krieg with Revol Greens, Christopher Abbott with Perennial Pantry, and Jonathan Stensgard with Pine Creek Farms. So we'll start just with a quick intro so you can get to know folks before we get into the question and answer sessions and that kind of moderated question session here. So Brendon, we'll start with you. Want to let folks kind of know who you are and what you do on your operation?
Sure. Thanks, Jeremy. So my name is Brendon Krieg. I'm one of the founders at Revol Greens. We are a greenhouse lettuce operation based in Owatonna, Minnesota. We have a 10-acre greenhouse situated right off of 35 as you are heading in or out of Owatonna. We grow mostly baby leaf lettuces, which have about a 21-day crop cycle. We're a year-round operation, so we grow 365 days a year. We capture all the rain and snow melt from our roof and use that as our irrigation water source. We grow in a hydroponic system, but it's a bit of a hybrid. We actually use some soil in our growing method as well. And we've been in operation about 3.5 years now. A couple of the other founders came from Bushel Boy Farms. Jay Johnson, who founded Bushel Boy Farms in the early 90s. Marco de Bruin, who's a 3rd-generation grower from the Netherlands and has been in Owatonna for about 15 to 20 years. And then Steve Amundsen, who was former head grower at Bushel Boy Farms.
Great. Thanks, Brendon.
Thank you.
Yeah. Christopher, can you tell us a little bit about your operation?
Yeah, I'm Christopher Abbott from Perennial Pantry. We're a new food processor, grain processor, and flour mill that's based in Burnsville. And we're working to bring Kernza perennial grain to market. So Kernza is a brand new crop that's been in development by breeders for the last 2 decades or so. There's a nonprofit down in Kansas called the Land Institute that's led a lot of the work, and then folks at the University of Minnesota's Forever Green program. And Kernza is the first perennial grain. So 70% of global calories come from grains, and all of those are in annual production that require annual tilling of soil. And soil is this really precious resource that, the UN says we have about 60 years of soil left at current rates of degradation, and that gets mixed up in a lot of problems like climate change, like water loss, and water issues. And so Kernza is this really innovative and exciting solution, a grain crop that you can plant once and it comes back year after year and mimics our prairies, but has an edible food crop that comes off of it. And Kernza is a cousin of wheat. So it's not an exact one-for-one replacement with wheat today, but that's sort of the goal that breeders are working towards. And has a really nutty, sweet, tasty flavor. We sell it as a whole grain and as a flour today. And so we're a vertically integrated operation that we don't grow, but we design and build out our own manufacturing processes to be able to take Kernza through to a finished product and do all processing in-house, and then do a lot of work on recipe development and figuring out ways to get Kernza in wholesale and consumer hands to help bring it to market and increase the acreages that are growing it.
Great. Thanks, Christopher. Jonathan, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your operation?
Hello, I'm Jonathan Stensgard. I co-own Pine Creek Farms with Jordan Flynn, and we're based out of Plainview, Minnesota. We're I would consider a micro farm. We have about 3 acres of tillable land. This is our 8th season farming. We rented for the first 5 years, and then this is our 3rd season on our own plot of land. And we sell at the farmers market. We sell to wholesale accounts, and we also have CSA, which is community supported agriculture. And we're always, just like Christopher was talking about, we're not quite there yet, but we're moving towards a no-till system because of how precious our topsoil is, and for the microorganisms that are living beneath the soil and the layers and everything like that. We're always trying to think about what's best for the environment first, obviously, and usually a lot of times that's what's the most efficient way of doing things in our mind. But we sell we probably grow 30 different types of vegetables, a lot of tomatoes. We have high tunnels, and a lot of lettuce. But yeah, I'd say farmers market's probably 30% of what we do. CSA is probably 30% of what we do, and then wholesale counts another 30% of what we do. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. All right. So yeah, I'll start with a few questions. I guess, Jonathan, we'll go ahead and start with you. What started you down the path to do this work in the food and farm system?
Well, we moved out. Me and Jordan both moved out to Oregon 12 years ago. I was like 20 years old. And before that, we didn't even really know what organic even meant, really. But out there, they don't have the wide open spaces like we do here. So any farmable land in the foothills and stuff is being used. Seemed like a lot for organic vegetable farming. And we actually ended up living on a farm in Campbell tents out there and just working on it for a summer. And then actually through hiked the Appalachian Trail and decided we wanted to do something that we were passionate about, and something that was good for the environment. And I guess we kind of just jumped in that first year and then realized that we loved what we were doing, and a career could be made out of it, and then decided to buy our own farm. And reading books, Jean Martin Fortier, he's from Canada, he wrote The Market Gardening, has kind of really shaped a lot of what we do. Just kind of trying to have a positive impact on the community around us, I'd say.
And was that when you first bought? Was that in Oregon or in Minnesota?
The book?
The land.
Oh, no, it was probably 3 years into farming on rented land near Lanesboro.
Okay.
We decided to buy our own, go for it and buy our own land.
Okay. Great. Thanks. Christopher, what started you down your path to do the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I also spent some time on veggie farms, on dairy farms out in Maine. And I grew up in Northfield, and I think that my interest in food systems and agriculture was seeing the environmental degradation and impact of it. And I think that after a few seasons on those farms, I was really excited about that work, and I kept coming back to grains. I kept feeling like I grew up around corn and soy, and that they dominate the landscape across the Midwest, and calorically are so important grains as a broader category. And I wasn't really seeing compelling solutions to them, or ways to think about them in small or local or regional ways, or to just rethink them in a way that could have a positive impact. And so first, I spent a while in the malting industry. Malt is the main ingredient in beer. It's it's a process to make sugars accessible in small grains. And over the last decade or so, there's been a growth of small regional malting companies, processors that are trying to connect local farmers and local brewers. And so I worked on that out in Maine. I have another company called Sprout Labs, where we manufacture small scale malting equipment at a really small scale to connect brewers and academics and hobbyists and distillers with local farmers, and the ability to have the processing equipment to do that. And I think I got into that and feeling like the grain industry is monolithic. There are a small number of enormous companies and huge economies of scale in it. And so much of the complexity of grains is that you can't just pick a kernel of wheat and eat it. You need an incredible number of machines between planting and that loaf of bread. And so much of that smaller scale of processing infrastructure has disappeared. It used to exist. Living in Northfield, we're one of many mill towns up and down the Cannon River. I think historically maybe there were 14 flour mills within 20 or 30 miles from where I live along the Cannon, and there aren't any. And and so the further I went into it, I felt like there's this compelling way to rethink grain agriculture and create markets for growers to be able to grow in a way that can scale and can impact soil and water and carbon. But that you got to have markets, and you have to have processing infrastructure to make all of that work and run. And so after several years of building this small scale equipment, we kind of got to the conclusion that that's a part of the key, but the closer we are to an end consumer, the more we can really tell a story, and the more we can really, I think, open up markets. And Kernza was this thing that we'd been aware of for a while, but sort of felt too big or too far away, and we ended up sort of jumping right into the middle of it and seeing an opportunity to launch a new brand about a year ago, and try to scale this thing that I think has a really big possibility to really impact global agriculture.
Great, thanks, Christopher. Brendon, let's go to you. What started you down your path to do the work you're doing?
Yeah, so my career in food or agriculture really started on the other side. So I was on the buying side of it, working for companies like C.H. Robinson in supply chain logistics for food, and then prior to joining Revol Greens, I was with Target and buying vegetables, buying and sourcing for Target stores, and really sort of, I guess, fell in love with this business as I would go out and visit our growers and our suppliers, but also at the same time seeing some major challenges that the supply chain was and is facing. 90% of lettuces and greens are still grown in California and Arizona, and Mexico, and then trucked across the country. Those areas of the country are having major issues with both climate change, shortages of fresh water, and really saw it as a way to make an impact of, let's grow this stuff closer to us. Let's grow it closer to home, where we can capture the water. We can, we have plenty of fresh water, and we can just do it so much more efficiently. So that's really where I became involved in it, and then joined up with the former Bushel Boy team that obviously had the growing experience that I did not have. And here we are 3.5 years later. So
Great, thanks. I think actually that's a decent segue into the next question, which is, was it difficult to kind of find the funding that you needed to finance that type of operation? I mean, I know it sounds like, Brendon, your operation is more of a team with lots of folks involved there, but how, just how does funding kind of come together for an operation like that?
Yeah, I think the challenges with funding in our operation is that it is such a unique way to grow, and it's very the initial capital costs are very high. It's expensive to build the infrastructure in the building, but once it's up, it's a fixed cost building and facility. So I think luckily we had some history with Jay and Marco from Bushel Boy, and some banking relationships that really helped us sort of get started there. So it was really a combination of some traditional financing and non-traditional financing is how we got started.
Okay. Were there any USDA programs or anything like that as far as funding or loans?
There were some initial USDA loans we were able to get when we first started. Yep.
Okay. Great. Jonathan, what about you? How do you? I know you said you rented for a few years and then eventually were able to buy something. How did that?
Yeah, we were lucky enough to where we bought some tillable acres from a family member. So, and I think that's a thing with agriculture now is usually, you're taking over your parents' farm, dairy farm, or wherever it was, but now that's not happening. So it's only becoming bigger and bigger farms. So we were just lucky in that way. And otherwise, I don't see, unless you had a lot of capital to use or whatever, I don't see how you could. So we were lucky in that way, I guess. But there is beginning farmer loans by the USDA, and other ones I guess we didn't really take advantage of, but there is things out there. Okay,
great, thanks. Yeah, there's that consolidation. I mean, the size of farms has definitely continued to get larger as folks get out of the business. Yeah. Christopher, what about you? How did you go about kind of pulling together funding for your operation?
Yeah, so we really started working on Kernza about a year ago, and over that time have been transitioning a lot of our team's energy from our other malting equipment company and into our Kernza company. And so it's been a mix of things. It's been revenue off our other company. We've won a variety of grants ranging from, we won the Food and Ag Division of the Minnesota Cup last year. We've got a crop research grant from the Minnesota Department of Agriculture to really figure out how you use Kernza, how you malt it, how you turn it into a flour. And a variety of other sort of business competitions that have allowed us to maintain ownership. And now we're looking towards the future and really see the need to bring on a lot more capital in the next few years to try to scale. And I think our experience in meeting with a variety of folks is that, for us, we really believe in being a benefit corporation, an entity that tries to hold its mission closely and not lose that as it attempts to scale. And I'd say our experience so far is that you really have to sort of prove that your business is going to work pretty well to get investors to sign on with sort of additional mission-related restrictions in place. And so, I'd say it's been a combination of those things, and then being scrappy and being able to manufacture our own equipment is a huge thing to be able to reduce our capital needs in the early days and see a path to scale where that's one huge expense for a grain processing facility, and to try to significantly reduce that.
Absolutely. So you actually managed to build your own equipment?
Yeah. After several years of manufacturing and bringing our malting equipment to market, we've got a shop with a lot of different tools and just a team with some experience within mechanical and electrical and engineering and yeah, continue to build out our own equipment at the scale that's appropriate for where Kernzo is at today.
Okay. Great. Christopher, what surprised you most when you started this? Kind of.
I think that I mean, I think in combining sort of the experience in food across these two different companies that I've been working on, probably persistence. I think that you have to work hard, you have to be lucky, you have to combine a variety of things, but I think it's just sort of an emotional roller coaster trying to be an entrepreneur and build a business, and things can be awesome and things can be really bad, and sort of just holding on to the belief that if you keep persisting and keep getting money to come in, you're going to be able to make it work, hopefully. And so my dad is an entrepreneur and built a business in the glass industry in Northfield, and so I grew up around that. But I think I didn't realize so much of the day-to-day challenges until jumping in myself.
Yeah, absolutely. What about you, Brendon? What surprised you most when you started this?
Yeah, I think Christopher nailed it there with the emotional roller coaster, and it is crazy. It's definitely been one of the most challenging things I've ever done, but also at the same time the most rewarding. So I think we're still growing. We grow in a greenhouse. We control the environment as much as we can, but we're not growing widgets. We're still growing produce and lettuce that reacts differently in all sorts of different situations. So I think I thought it was going to be a lot easier to grow in a greenhouse environment than it is, and luckily we have a very talented team, and we're still learning every day. I mean, we're almost 4 years into this, and we're learning a ton about different varietals and what they like, what they don't like, and it's been a wild ride, but it's been fun.
Great. Thanks, Brendon. Jonathan, what about you? What was most surprising?
Say what they both just said, just the roller coaster of it all. And with us, we're trying to learn how to grow 30 different varieties of veggies, and everything always takes 3 times longer than you think it's going to, and it always costs 3 times more than you think it's probably going to cost. So, I mean, we're still, even 8 years in, we're still in the investment part of our operation, putting up high tunnels and stuff like that. And just, if I would have thought we were making as much money as we are now, I thought we'd be cash or getting more of it, but we're putting so much into our business, which is a good thing. But just the roller coaster of it, and I never thought I'd enjoy it this much, actually, which is a good thing. There's endless amount of things that you can learn for each crop and variety, like Brendon was saying, and that's what the fun part about it is.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Jonathan, how do you see your operation helping the land and the water, and to you, kind of how does it differ from the big agribusiness model, 1,000, 2,000 acre farms that we have throughout much of Minnesota?
I mean, obviously with organic, USDA organic or certified organic, you have to meet these certain standards, and they come out and do an inspection every year and everything like that. So we're not spraying the pesticides and the synthetic fertilizers that then go into the watershed. And I mean, now we're, if you were to dig a well out in Plainview, you're gonna have to go 360 feet deep to get to drinkable water, whereas they used to be 150 feet deep. But now even at 360 feet, it's still, the nitrates are too high for pregnant and women to drink and babies to drink. And then with the whole no-till thing, we always try to keep our ground or our soil covered. There's rarely something never growing on it, or there's rarely a point in time where there's not something growing on it, or we cover it with cover crops. And so erosion, if you don't have topsoil, you're not gonna be able to grow anything. So I'd say just the soil should be the number one thing when you're farming. And when you're always leaving it open, like if you go drive out in the country today, you're going to see everything is just bare dirt. And that's like the worst thing you could be doing for the soil. I think that, yeah.
Yeah, thanks. And did you go through organic certification, or is it just you follow organic practices?
No, we're certified. It's a
Okay.
yearly thing, annual thing.
Okay.
You have to
And
be inspected and fill out applications, and they go through it all. Yeah.
okay. And did you transition when you were renting land, or when you?
No, we were able, because I mean, I think there we had 2 acres of tillable
Okay.
land. And it was basically like a prairie before that. So it hadn't been farmed conventionally in like 15 years. So we were able to just jump right into it. And then when we bought our new our land or farm that we have now, we waited 3 years. We bought it and waited the 3 years that you have to let it sit fallow, or not spray on it, but we just let it sit fallow.
Okay.
So then we could just jump, because we have contracts and stuff, so we could just jump right back into being certified organic.
Great. Okay. That works well. Great. Yeah. Christopher, how do you see your operation, and I guess even down to the suppliers, and helping land and water, and how does that kind of differ from the systems that you grew up around?
Yeah, absolutely. We're with climate change, we're at the point where we need to dramatically reduce emissions, but also we need huge negative emissions. We need to take so much carbon out of the atmosphere, and that has to go somewhere. And research from the UN really looks at, there are many ways to do that, and we need many different solutions to pull it off. And things like trees, things like magical machines that can suck CO2 out of the air and inject it into rock. But the UN's pretty clear that the fastest, cheapest, most scalable way to decarbonize the atmosphere is soil and soil carbon sequestration, plants pumping carbon into soil, and then not eroding that soil, actually, concretely storing it down in the soil. And so something that's so exciting about Kernza is that it is a grain crop. It's something that can really feed us, but it can also stay in place year after year. There are pretty compelling images from the Land Institute where they have Kernza's maybe 10, 12-foot root system next to annual wheat's 2 or 3 foot root system. And Kernza is just a sort of a powerhouse at pumping carbon down into the soil. And so, it's something that you can imagine being massively scalable across millions of acres, and really having a significant impact at both reducing current emissions from tilling soil, from being out in tractors, from shipping that grain all over, but also really pumping carbon down into the soil. So that's one exciting component. And then water impact is a huge second one, because the healthier your soil is, the better it is at being able to infiltrate water and handle extreme rain events. And since Kernza is a perennial and it's already there in the spring, its root systems are developed. And so it's really able to fully absorb any nutrients that are applied to it. And all of the early research from the University of Minnesota is that the huge nitrate pollution that happens from any corn or soybean crop around here, where all of that nitrogen is being applied when the plant is still tiny and can't actually absorb it. Kernza absorbs it all, and there's zero water pollution that comes off of it. And so a lot of early acres of Kernza are being sited in well areas and in rural water districts to be able to have a pretty tangible impact on that community's water source without putting in an enormous investment of being able to clean that water. And so all of the University of Minnesota's Kernza varieties are going to be named after lakes and bodies of water. And there's been some pretty exciting modeling and data analysis looking at if you can hit X percentages of Kernza acreage, within the Minnesota River watershed, what are the huge impacts that you can have in the river, in the lakes, in the Mississippi. And so, yeah, I think Kernza, it's all about the soil, but there's an exciting impact in a wide variety of ways.
Absolutely. Thanks, Thanks, Christopher. And I think probably if folks have not seen photos of that root system, you can go to the Land Institute's website and see those photos, and it's quite impressive. So it sounded like the University of Minnesota will continue breeding Kernza now that it's been bred to its current state by the Land Institute. Is that correct?
They're sort of close partners who are working on it. So Kernza is a domesticated wild species. Intermediate wheatgrass is the actual species, which is a grass. It's a forage crop that's been grown, for cattle, for animals, for forage across the US since the 1920s. And starting in the 1990s, the Land Institute started domesticating it, selecting for larger seeds. It's all traditional non-genetic modification breeding. And then the U jumped in about 2010. And so they both have their own breeding programs, and it's all sort of the tip of the spear. Kernza is the attempt to perennialize wheat, but they have breeding projects that are working to perennialize all other major grain and oilseed crops. And Kernza is just the furthest along. But in the coming years, from both institutions, we'll start seeing perennial versions of lots of different grains and oilseeds. And they're, it's 20 years versus 10,000 years of development with annual wheat, and so they're doing a good job. And the vision is sort of domesticate this wild species, and then they're starting to now breed it into annual wheat to perennialize wheat, and so it's sort of this many decade vision of replacing grain crops globally.
Wow, great, thanks. Right. Brendon, what about you and your operation? Obviously, you use a lot of water, but also you mentioned that it's soil-based as well. And how does that kind of differ from a lot of the operations throughout the Midwest?
Yeah, for us, it's all about being as efficient as possible with the small amount of land that we do, consume within the greenhouse environment. So, like I said, we have a 10-acre greenhouse. But because we're able to turn it so fast, we have every single day we're planting and harvesting, and the idea is that we're always keeping our greenhouse full. And with the amount of crops and rotations we can get in a year, we're between 20 to 30% more productive on that acreage versus field production. So our 10-acre greenhouse site is equivalent to about a 200 to 300 acre of outdoor grown lettuces. So we're really working to conserve. Like I said, we capture rain and snow melt from our roof. We hold it on site, and we bring it in and use it as irrigation throughout the year. So on a normal year, we get enough rain and snow melt to irrigate our entire crop. Really the only water that leaves the facility is in the actual plants themselves. So we're very efficient. We use about 95% less water than open field lettuce production. And then of that water, almost all of it is recaptured rain and snow melt.
Wow. Okay. Oh, that's fantastic. So do you not have the need for a well then? Or
we have a well as a backup.
Okay.
If we ran into a drought condition and or anything like that. But yeah, we do have well water when needed. But most of our water usage is recaptured water.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So Brendon, how can folks in Greater Rochester support local agriculture? And second part, where can we find your products if folks here would like to?
Yeah, I think just looking for it and being conscious of what you're buying in the grocery stores, supporting local farmers markets, supporting CSAs, supporting local and independent restaurants. Really there's some of our best supporters and customers. So I think just being conscious of it and trying to support and buy local whenever possible.
Okay, great, thanks. Christopher, what about you? How can folks support local agriculture, do you think? And also, where can we find your products?
Yeah, I certainly agree with what Brendon was just saying. You know, I live down in Northfield. My fiance is a flower farmer. Most of my friends in town are veggie farmers and CSA farmers, and I think Minnesota is a great place with co-ops, with restaurants, with CSA opportunities to tie in. Yeah, I'd encourage people to think about grains too. I think that they're in so many of the foods that we eat, and often they aren't really a part of the local food conversation. And so I think that it's an exciting thing to think about and engage with bakers, with brewers. If you're supporting that local bakery or brewery, where's their main ingredient coming from, and what's their relationship to soil, to the environment, to farmers. Yeah, and then just awareness of Kernza. I think Kernza is a wildly exciting and really optimistic opportunity, and there's a huge community of folks, of nonprofits and researchers and farmers all over who are trying to bring it to life. And Minnesota happens to be in a great place where a huge amount of the energy is happening, and no one knows what Kernza is. It's brand new in many ways. Until we launched our crowdfunding campaign last May, you really couldn't buy Kernza. Patagonia had a beer with it on the West Coast. General Mills did like a very tiny specialty release cereal, but it's been completely inaccessible until now. And so we're the first folks on the market with a flour and a whole grain, and making it accessible for people to just use as an ingredient. But I'd say, look for it. Ask your baker, ask your brewer for it. It's in some regional breads and beers right now. You can buy online direct from us. You can buy on Amazon. And just about a month ago, we just started going into grocery stores, but that's still in the metro area. So in Rochester, it would be online at our website.
Okay, great, thanks. All right, we'll go to Jonathan, and then actually after this, we'll go to questions from the attendees, because I see a couple are coming in here. Yes, so Jonathan, how can folks support local ag, and where can we find your products?
Just going to local farmers market. I mean, even small towns have, Plainview has one on Wednesdays. We don't go to that one, but we're at the Rochester Farmers Market every Saturday during the summer, as well as our CSA program, which is basically you become a member and you sign up in the spring, and you get a box full of fresh in-season vegetables delivered near you to a drop-off site every week or every other week throughout the season. And then just asking your restaurants where they're getting their food, or it's also great to see like Revol Greens and Hy-Vees and stuff like that, like just checking out where that food is coming from, check out the package, check out, just things need to be more localized and more regionalized at least. But yeah,
absolutely, great. And I for those folks not looking at the chat, I'll call out an answer that you just typed into the chat, which is that you've got plenty of space on your 3-acre farm. So you do everything in very intensive way. And I think that's something that's kind of counterintuitive when people see those massive corn and soy operations that are on thousands of acres. You think you couldn't possibly get anything out of 3 acres, or Brendon 10 acres, right? But you can, it's about how you farm. So that's great. Right. Looks like we have another question here from David. Christopher, how many acres are you growing, or do your suppliers grow on, and does yield go down after several years, and do you need to rejuvenate the grain in some way?
Yeah, so there are around 3,000 acres of Kernza right now, and just in the last year or so, it's gotten to the point where seed is no longer the limiting factor. It's really market. And so we're at the point where the genetics, the farmer interest, the extension expertise, a lot of those pieces of the puzzle are there. And now we just need to really dramatically increase the amount of Kernza going to market. And about a third of all Kernza acreage is in Minnesota currently. There's a fledgling Kernza growers cooperative that's getting off the ground right now to really aggregate all of that crop together and help bring it to market. And so we currently source all across Minnesota. And sort of from there are three main hubs of Kernza. There's an area down in the southwestern corner of the state. There are a lot of growers around sort of the St. Cloud area. And then between sort of Northfield, Red Wing, and Rochester, there's another concentration of growers. And we work across all of those. And yeah, Kernza, at the moment, current genetics are about 4 years of production before yields really have gone down too much. Kernza, for growers, you get a hay or a forage crop in the spring, a grain crop in the summer, and then another hay or forage crop in the fall. And so there are multiple income sources, but the grain yields really start going down too much after sort of year 3. And that's where a lot of the breeding and research is focused on. How do you prevent that from happening? How do you have new genetics that are able to maintain yields? And that's also sort of place focused. A lot of the breeding is also in Kansas, where they aren't seeing those impacts, I think, as much, and it's more of a true perennial.
Interesting. Okay, so our climate here in Minnesota is different enough that it impacts it there.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. All right. Well, if attendees would like to ask questions, you can either unmute yourself and ask, or type it into the chat, and I'll go ahead and read those out to folks, and I'll watch for those and listen. And in the meantime, I don't see any new questions in chat. I can go ahead and I'll fill in when if there's a break and ask other questions. Does anybody have anything right now? Attendees? Okay.
This is Anna. I have a quick question, and hopefully it's quick anyway. My organization, Conservation Minnesota, we work with people all over the state. And this comes up all the time in the metro, where everyone, talks about how they'd like more access to local foods, Minnesota grown stuff, and not just at their co-ops and farmers markets, but at the mainstream grocery stores. So the Kowalskis and the Lunds and the Byerlys, and I guess Hy-Vee now is expanded up there. And we keep trying to figure out how, and I was working with a group from U of M for a little while, a focus group, trying to figure out how you would get those consumer dollars to trickle down to farmers like yourselves doing the things that they want, that these consumers in the cities, you're producing the food and the products that they want, and they want to know they're grown here. Have you thought about that at all? Or do you know, are there ways that you could think of where you could close that loop a little bit, or make that circle a little tighter from production to market in sort of the mainstream?
I guess I can take that one. We work with a wide range of grocers and customers, from co-ops to Cub Foods, to Target and Hy-Vee. And they're all a little different, but I think the local grocers like the Kowalskis, the Lunds and Byerlys, the Coborns, are really great at supporting local food and local producers. I think when it comes to local food in Minnesota, I think a lot of the challenge can be kind of that last mile, right, of how do we get vegetables from Jonathan's farm through the supply chain, whether it's through a distribution center or direct to store. How do we manage packaging and making sure that the packaging that may work for a farmer's market may not work for mass retail. So I think it's it's really sort of closing that loop and trying to figure out what's that final step or thing that would take to to make that leap into these different levels of retailers.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Christopher, Jonathan, any thoughts on that? Or
I think Brendon and Revol Greens have way more experience in the retail world than I do, or my team does. But I'd echo. I think that seems like a huge supply chain challenge of those stores. They're looking for scale, and people that can supply scale, and people that can navigate through their systems. We're sort of at this point of figuring that out, that we're testing out retail markets, but also know that Kernza is at a point where they're low yields, where we're trying to build a system where it can compete with corn in terms of pricing, which means it's a high priced grain and has an inefficient supply chain these days. And so that makes it an expensive thing. And once you start trying to run through a distributor and run through a retailer, it's tricky to make all of those numbers work and get it on a store shelf at a point that people are going to buy it. And it's also just a whole thing to learn to be able to navigate that kind of supply chain and get food to people's shelves in that way. And, it's where people get food. So you got to figure out how to make it work. But I think that, I think supply chains are hidden and are very complex and are really tricky things to try to innovate inside of and make it all work from a business standpoint.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Question for Brendon. Brendon, how do you heat your greenhouses during the cold months, and do you use special lights, and what kind?
Yeah, great question. So we do obviously have to heat in the cold months. We use natural gas to heat, but we use a radiant heating system. So I don't know if any of you have driven by on 35 and seen our logo on the big tank. There's two of them there now, but that's like a giant hot water heater. So what we do is we have a boiler system that we'll run it during the day, and we'll slowly and efficiently heat up water in that tank. And at the same time we're running our boiler, we're taking the carbon, we're capturing the carbon or the carbon emissions from that boiler, and instead of releasing the CO2 into the atmosphere, we're able to pump it into our greenhouse as fertilizer for the plants. So although we are utilizing or using natural gas, we aren't releasing those carbon emissions into the atmosphere, and we're utilizing them to help the plants grow. You would be surprised though, as soon as that sun comes up on a January day in Minnesota, we really don't need very much heat once that sun comes up. It's really just during the night time where we really need to heat and maintain the heat in the greenhouse. So we use climate screens as well. So we'll use those as insulating blankets. So when the sun goes down, we close a set of screens that act as an insulating barrier, saves about 30% on our heating costs. And then you mentioned lighting. Yes, we do use lighting. We use high efficiency LED lighting to basically stretch the days in the winter months. So in order to maintain our growth cycle throughout the year, when we're in the low light levels of the winter, we need to supplement with LED lighting. So we use LED lighting. We use a small amount of more traditional HID lighting as well, but most of it is LED lighting.
Great, thanks. And so your crops are mostly cold weather crops. Do you actually have to change the varieties when it gets to the peak of summer and it gets pretty hot in there?
Yes, good question. There are a couple of varieties where we'll have sort of summer and winter varietals in there. Arugula is one, spinach is another one, romaine can be temperamental in different times of the year. So yes, we'll actually switch out varieties as as we're going throughout the year.
Okay, great, thanks. David, I think you unmuted yourself. Oh,
yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Brendon. Just a follow up. By pumping that CO2 into the greenhouses, do you have any metrics on how much that increases your yield or anything like that?
Oh, great question. I'm not exactly sure what that would equate to as far as yield increase. I do know just overall, we see a very slight dip in yield in the winter months, but our CO2 levels in the winter are actually higher because we're able to recapture it. But so it's attributed more to just the light. Obviously, right. The level of light is the most important thing, but I'm not quite sure on the CO2 question. I could get back to you on it, talk to our
No,
growers.
That's okay. I was just curious. I think it's very interesting that you're doing that. So, thanks.
Mhm.
Jeremy, it looks like you're still on mute.
Thanks so much. I would have kept talking probably for a while there on mute. We'll go ahead with another question. This one's a little bit more open-ended for folks. I guess, Jonathan, we'll start with you. In an ideal world, what would farming look like to you?
I think just more local and regionalized, like Revol Greens, bigger companies, but smaller companies or smaller farms selling at the farmers markets, and then the bigger conventional farmers being regulated, kind of like how we are with the organic seal, where someone comes out and inspects, what we're doing. There should be some standards for waterways and cover crops, just to save that precious topsoil. And I think throughout time, hopefully science and everything will help us, we'll learn from it. And I think just regulations on how we farm and how things are done need to be set, so that we have to pay to do the right thing, or to be organic, if you want to go the right way, whatever. But just more standards of how things are done, because it doesn't affect, they're not, a conventional farmer is not going to change anything. They're just trying to make a living. Things aren't going to happen until there's a reason to change. And the reason being is that the way people farm changes a lot more than just, it changes everything, really. So from your waterways to what you're consuming to everything. So
yeah, great, thanks. Christopher, let's go to you next. In an ideal world, what would farming look like to you?
Yeah, I think similar things. I think that it's really important to have a diversity across a system. It makes a lot of sense to have really small producers, but also to have folks at medium scales who are able to to get product further around. I think that soil healthy farming is a huge thing. At the folks breeding kerns at the University of Minnesota, they're the Forever Green partnership, and their model is continuous living cover. So they're working on, I think, 16 different crops to try to have sort of a whole new slate of hardware for Minnesota farmers to work with, and to be able to keep our fields continuously green, to always have crops there. And they're really trying to think about that as a model that can both help growers get out of commodity markets, help them find more profitable crops that can work well, but also pairing that with big environmental impacts. And so I think as a on the ground mechanism and method, the more local producers of lots of different foods are really important, but I think that we're also going to continue producing grains at a huge scale. And so figuring out a better way to do that is a huge thing. And then I think processors too. I think that, so often processed foods inherently means something tricky or unhealthy or complicated or bad. And also, we're not all going to bake our bread or make our crackers or make our pasta at home all the time. And so figuring out regional ways of being able to get products to market and still feed our communities.
Thanks. Brendon, what about you? In an ideal world, what would it look like?
Yeah, very similar answer to Christopher and Jonathan. I think more localized and regionalized supply chain. I think as you look at fresh produce over the last 50, 60, 70 years, it's been sort of centralized with the efficiencies of transportation and refrigerated transportation, and I think at the detriment the environment and local farmers and communities. And I think it's not only going to be an ideal environment, but I think soon it'll be necessary. We need to. I think the pandemic has really highlighted the challenges with the food system, in the United States, and our reliance on imported food in many cases, and we need to do more to build out these local and regionalized supply chains, to continue to flourish. So,
Great, thanks, Brendon.
Mhm.
So, folks who are participants, I'll go ahead and keep asking. We've got a long list of questions here, but at any time, just go ahead and type a question into the chat, and I'll pause and go to your question. Okay. All right. Next question, I guess, for Brendon. How did the pandemic impact business, if it did?
Yeah, so it's pandemic's been tough on I think everyone in some ways, and our food service business going into it was about 35% of our total business. So when restaurants shut down, that really impacted us. We saw an increase in retail sales, but not enough to make up what we had lost for food service. But I think since then it's really been really impressed with especially our food service partners and restaurants, of how they've adapted and reacted, and our food service business is back to where it was pre-pandemic levels. So that's been great. I think another impact the pandemic has been on the supply chain side. We were right at the end of finishing our expansion to 10 acres. And I think it just really highlighted some challenges that we need to, or some loopholes we need to close in our supply chain for equipment, greenhouse equipment, supplies, things like that. Really hampered us, and really highlighted the need to have a diverse supply chain there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think the whole concept of just on time in the supply chain just went to heck when the pandemic hit everywhere. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Jonathan, what about you? How'd the pandemic affect your operation?
I feel like we were really grateful because we had our best season last year. Market was maybe a little less consistent, but maybe the grocery stores and stuff picked up that. But as long as the restaurants would be closed down for a little bit, but grocery stores and co-ops were selling more, so we were able to get more. And then CSAs were really big last year. We had more CSAs than we ever had. So yeah, we were really grateful. We weren't sure what it was going to be like, and when March and April hit, it was kind of scary, but yeah, it didn't really affect us as much as it did a lot of other people. So, and maybe the scale, like with Revol Greens, like the restaurants, we had market, which is a huge part of our operation, and that was thankfully open the whole season. So yeah.
Great. Yeah, I've heard from a lot of folks that CSAs everywhere, it just had a huge year.
Yeah, we had to turn people away because we wanted to give people a good CSA. We didn't want to just like have unlimited amount.
Right. There's 3 green beans.
Yeah.
Great. Christopher, how did the pandemic affect your operation?
Yeah, I mean, going in, we were working on Kernza very little, and we're basically a capital equipment manufacturing company selling kind of pricey machines to breweries. And so that pretty quickly made us say, well, we were doing a little bit of wholesale with Kernza. We were basically acting as a distributor for some product that you had processed but needed help getting to market. And so it really accelerated our plans. we'd been wanting to put more of our energy into Kernza, but as things started shutting down, we said, I guess this is the opportunity to jump and go for it. And so, yeah, I'd say it, it pushed us towards what we wanted to be doing more, and helped us be scrappy and figuring it out. And it's been exciting to put more and more of our time into it, and really try to grow our own in-house processing capacity, and also get a lot more kerns out into the world. And so don't have revenue from kerns to compare to from the previous year, but I'm sure folks being home and baking, and also looking for ways to be able to still have an impact on the world from their kitchens are all ways that have benefited us as we've tried to get this thing off the ground.
Fantastic. Wow. So years down the road, you'll be able to look back and see the pandemic almost as an origin story for how you really went down the path that you followed. I mean, that's kind of incredible. Yeah. Great. Let's see if I can hear better. Yeah, there's a question for Jonathan. Jonathan, intensive production also deletes soil fertility. How do you maintain and improve your soil fertility and health?
Well, I guess with that, I mean, just trying to get the most out of every square inch of the farm. We go by bed feet, but like in the high tunnels, we graft our tomatoes, so you're getting better yields in that way. For fertility, we do a lot of compost from it's called Cosmo. They're from Wisconsin. They're a dairy farm that makes their own compost. So we add a lot of compost to our soil, and just cover crops, always keeping it covered, like Christopher has talked about. That adds a lot of fertility. And instead of, because we have 30-inch beds, which for our type of farm, Johnny's Seeds, every tool is made for that 30-inch bed, and it's so instead of 3 rows of carrots within a 5-foot space, we're putting 6 rows of carrots in a 30-inch bed. So just more intensive in that way. It's not like we're tilling more. We're actually trying to move away from tilling completely, but in that way, I guess we're more intensive, fitting more into a smaller area.
Okay, great. And it sounds like you do use cover crops. Do you use mulches or anything when you're not using?
So yeah, we use reusable ground fabric. It's kind of like what you'd see, but it's 20-year guaranteed or whatever. It's a really thick ground fabric that you put holes in it for certain crops that are there all season, like peppers or cucumbers or whatever. So yeah, that it lets rain in, to whereas a lot of farms use plastic mulch, but then you have to take that out every year, and then you're left with all this plastic that just seems wrong. You're trying to do the right thing, and then you get all this plastic. This is reusable, and it lets water in and prevents erosion as well. So stops us from having to weed as well.
Right. David, did you have another question?
Yeah, well, Jonathan, thanks for your information. Just kind of very fascinated how like these market farms work, and sounds like you're one. What kind of irrigation systems do you use?
A lot of drip tape under that fabric, which just little drip tape running along, and it's spaced maybe every 6 inch, and it just slowly goes into the soil. We do use some overhead irrigation for direct seeded stuff. But yeah.
Do you use then floating row covers to prevent pests and things like that?
Yep. More for just getting the plant going in the spring, and then in the fall, keeping it from protecting it from frost. But we do use some for keeping pests out as well. And our high tunnels have insect netting on the walls or like in the openings, so pests can't get in.
Yep. So yeah, I asked about your high tunnels, and do you like do all your seed starting in there, and then do you just use it to extend the season, or do you actually grow over the winter?
Yeah, we use part of one as our greenhouse in the spring, and we keep expanding it, but we just put our tomatoes in, so now it moved back to just a high tunnel, and we just use it for season extension. I like my winters off to go travel and stuff.
Yeah, right. Okay, well, thanks. I have a question for Chris. The grain kernza, how does it compare, like in terms of, water usage, pest resistance, as compared to maybe the traditional wheat crop and things like that? I assume that they're probably trying to genetically, improve all those traits. So it uses less water, more resistance to, pests and maybe some other diseases that, traditional wheat crops are susceptible to.
Yeah, so water, in terms of water use, its root structure is just so massive that it's really able to access water deeper down in the soil, to hold more water when rains do come. And so the original breeding location down in Kansas is really an incredibly dry location. And so we're starting to see the varieties of kernza be developed more for specific locations, but it's an efficient user of water. And in terms of pests, a lot of that's related within grains to humidity. Sort of the more humid, the more issues that you can have with different funguses. And that's more often what is the downfall of small grain production in the upper Midwest. There aren't too many actual, bugs or pests that are going to cause problems within a grain field. Or within a small grain field. And so, yeah, certainly breeders, I think, are working on that. And then that's also sort of a challenge on our side. And how do you take in a crop that comes from a larger field where some of it's going to be perfectly usable and some of it's going to have some problems or have some kind of mold or blight or something on it, and how in the cleaning processes can you remove the bad stuff, keep the good stuff, and sort of still make it all work instead of just wholesale rejecting a lot from a farmer. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Jeremy, you're on mute still.
Again, sorry about that. Thank you. Thanks, Amanda, for typing in a couple of those URLs, and Christopher as well. Debbie had asked newbie here, dig insights from others by hearing their thoughts. Let me know if I can join the communities or take a look for the detail on blog or web maybe. So we have all three of your websites up here. If you have any other sites, folks, that you maybe like to visit around local or sustainable ag, go ahead and type those into the chat so that Debbie can see those. I'll also add a few in a minute here.
I have another question.
Oh yeah, David.
Brendon, just to be fair, you're a controlled environment, but do you have any pest issues or disease issues, and how do you manage those things if you do have them?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, we are a controlled environment. We obviously try to keep everything out of the greenhouse, but we in the spring and summer we have a vented roof, so we can open our roof, and we have insect netting on the roof. But there are small pests, small flies, shore flies, and things that can get in. But we don't spray, we don't use any pesticides. We use what we call an integrated pest management system. So we'll use good bugs to attack the bad bugs. But yeah, we keep it under control using that system.
Okay. How about any like fungus diseases or anything like that, mold? That probably is. Your plants probably don't get wet because you're using hydroponics.
Exactly. Yeah, we really only water overhead for the first probably one third of the plant cycle until that plant really has a chance to establish the root into the water. So the plant will grow through the small furrow of soil on our trays, and then it'll it'll grow into the water. Once it's established in the water, we don't water overhead at all. So we really don't have a fungus issue with our plants.
Okay. So, and do you plant straight from seed, I imagine?
Yep. So we have a germination chamber, so we'll germinate depending on the variety between 2 to 4 days in a germination room, which is great because we can stack them. They're not taking up room in our greenhouse, and then we bring them out to the greenhouse.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
I do want to say thank you to everybody. I've asked a lot of questions. I appreciate all your input and appreciate all that you do.
Great questions.
Yeah, thanks, David. Great. I posted a few more sites in there if folks are interested on the call. So the first 4 are all Minnesota-based organizations that work on sustainable agriculture in different ways. And then the 5th one is a national organization that has some good information about sustainable ag. Great. Let's see, we got about 15 minutes left. Let's ask maybe another question, unless anyone in the audience has a question. Can maybe building on the COVID pandemic question, how do you guys see local businesses impacting the resilience of the region? How can we kind of, as a community, better improve the resilience? And I'll just let whoever wants to go first go on that one.
Yeah, I can go. I think what Jonathan highlighted with the CSAs, and I think COVID really highlighted it really alerted everyone to the challenges and just being more resilient and less reliant on the the national food supply chain or any supply chain, right? I'm obviously in the early days saw a shortage in things like toilet paper and things like that, and I think everyone just sort of started rethinking their what they buy every day, how they support their communities, and I think we just need more of that, right? More localized production, more support from consumers in the community, restaurants as well. Oh.
Great.
Yeah, I'd add to that. I had an interesting conversation recently with one of the sort of supply chain developers for Kernza at the University of Minnesota, and he was reflecting on the growth of Kernza more broadly in Minnesota in comparison to other states, and was sort of expressing his belief that the social capital and the connectedness of the community was one of the most important assets in thinking about climate resilience or thinking about robustly building out a decentralized supply chain that can actually handle shocks to the system. And so, yeah, I think that the actual infrastructure, the actual producers and people with the knowledge to do it are so essential, but also a whole lot of relationships across so many different fields are really important, and that food is truly an incredibly interconnected space. And some of those organizations that you listed in there, having folks like Land Stewardship at the Capitol advocating for policy that makes sense for soil healthy farming, or folks at Renewing the Countryside, who can provide a lot of the education or connections, are huge in being able to make it all run.
Exactly. Jonathan, any other thoughts on local resiliency?
Everything they said.
Yep.
was-
All right. Let's see another one here. Hey, what are the health benefits of the foods that you grow or produce?
Yeah, I would just say the biggest thing, and probably for Jonathan's operation as well, is just the fact that you can consume it so much closer to being harvested. Whatever you're growing, as soon as it's harvested, it starts degrading and starts losing health benefits. So, if you can harvest today and it's in the store or in your CSA box or at the farmer's market tomorrow, you're so much further ahead than product that's shipped from California or Mexico that may spend 5-6 days on a truck and then maybe a couple more days in a distribution center. So I think just that the fact that we grow healthy products and then you consume them so much closer to when they were harvested is a huge health benefit.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say Kernza is sort of the first crop of a term that you might have heard of. You'll probably hear a lot more over the coming decade: regenerative agriculture. A lot of people who are pitching regenerative agriculture as sort of an evolution of organic farming and a way of thinking even more holistically across the system, trying to create models that are not extractive, but are truly regenerating soil and nutrients. And so part of that pitch is more nutrient dense crops. If you have healthier soil, you're going to have healthier plants that can handle a changing climate and increase in pests. And also there's some amount of research and sort of a new realm of research within foods that healthier soil and those healthier plants grow more nutrient dense foods. I think that's sort of broadly within regenerative agriculture, within local food. Kernza specifically, it's a cousin of wheat, but not quite wheat. It has more protein. It still has gluten, but less gluten. And it's something that, in a yeasted dough, you're probably only using 25% Kernza. But in something like a banana bread or a cake where it's just using baking powder as a leavening agent, you can use 100% Kernza. Then it has similar sort of nutrient profile to wheat, but substantially more flavor and a lot more interest, I think, in the finished product.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think just the taste for our stuff, the taste is undeniably, like, from the day before being harvested to last week or whatever. It's just, that makes me want to eat that instead of from California or whatever. And that's why it's great to see companies like Revol Greens and everything to have something closer, have some bigger company that can supply Hy-Vees and Targets and everything like that. Healthier food like that, healthier fresh food. It's not coming 2,000 miles away.
Right. Yeah, there are folks out there who've never really tasted a tomato.
Yeah,
that they get the hard little tomatoes. Absolutely. Yeah, I would encourage anyone too, if you're in California, to go take a look at the Central Valley, because the first time I did, I was just amazed. I always thought it was this lush place, kind of like Minnesota or like the Willamette Valley in Oregon is. I mean, it looks like a desert, and the soil is just, it's nothing compared to what we have here. So, yeah, it's incredible. Oh, sorry, you're on mute, John.
I was just there this last winter, and it was the first time being there as well. And or even just the water running through the little aquifers or whatever you'd call them. It's pretty messed up.
Yeah, it's a strange place. Great.
Yeah, it's sort of like a golf course in the middle of Scottsdale, right? You kind of have it's a desert climate, and really they grow product and produce there because they can control. They don't have the rainfall. They can control the when they water the crop, and they can really produce some really consistent quality product. But it's almost like they're doing it artificially with utilizing the groundwater, and wells are getting deeper and deeper, and it's a real challenge out there.
Yeah, definitely. All right, we're getting near to the end, and I'll watch for any chat questions from folks, but I wanted to give each of you kind of opportunity to just say anything that maybe someone didn't ask a question about. I guess, Jonathan, we'll go ahead and start with you if you had anything you wanted to add about your operation or farming or anything.
I think just in anything more localized and regionalized, if you're gonna, I don't know what would be a good honey, or if you want some honey, try to find something that's regional or localized, or helping woodworking or beer, support, local breweries, or just more of, we just need more of that. I mean, why wouldn't you want to be supporting something that you can, we don't know where our food is coming from. We don't know where all these things come from. We have no relationship with them. And if we can try to develop more relationship with the things that we're consuming and using every day, that would be a good start.
Absolutely. Brendon, we'll go to you next.
Yeah, I would agree with Jonathan, and just asking questions, what's in the food we're consuming, where is it coming from, who's growing it, who's behind it, I think is really important, and supporting local as much as possible, and I think just continuing to educate yourself on the food you're consuming and how it's being grown is so important. And I'd say too, continue to challenge those producers, whether they're national producers or local producers. I think we can all continue to get better, whether it's energy consumption, plastic usage, water usage, whatever it is. It's important to hear from consumers that stuff is important to them. And it just really drives companies, local regional companies, to continue to improve.
Great, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Christopher.
Yeah, I'd say sort of awareness and engagement with soil. Soil is this, it's just dirt, from one perspective, it's not a very interesting thing. And on the other side, literally all of life is dependent on soil. And it's something that we can build and create, but also it's on geologic timescales. It's hundreds, it's thousands of years to create meaningful amounts of soil. And so I think it's one of our most precious tools in thinking about how to combat climate change. And that really being able to understand and engage with that, I think, is a pretty key way of building a new food system that can really take care of and build soil, and try to leverage it as a tool for creating a livable planet.
Thank you. Well said. All right. Well, folks, thanks for joining us this evening in celebration of Earth Fest and Earth Month. Thank you to Brendon Krieg from Revol Greens, Christopher Abbott with Perennial Pantry, and Jonathan Stensgard from Pine Creek Farms. Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. And I'd encourage you to check out the Earth Fest mn.org website. We have a full lineup of events for the rest of the month, and so we'd love to see you at another Earth Fest event. So I hope everybody has a great evening, and thanks again to our panelists. Really appreciate your time and your expertise, and let's make sure that we support local.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye.